Greetings. I want to start by thanking the Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign for their kind invitation to me to be with you, albeit not in person, in this very important conference on settler colonialism in Palestine. At the very root of settler colonialism in all instances lies racism, very deeply seated racism of the colonizers who view the colonized as lesser humans or non-human at all, or what I call relative humans, humans only in the relative sense, who deserve relative rights, not the full set of human rights. Zionist settler colonialism of Palestine is no exception. Indeed, Zionist settlers viewed the Palestinians as lesser humans who are not worthy of full rights. A land without a people, for a people without a land, a key slogan of the Zionist movement, basically omitted the very existence of the indigenous Palestinian population of the land, comparing us with animals and insects and some human problems that you have to deal with in this otherwise nice land. Also, the Balfour Declaration contained some of that very important instance of racism. Balfour said, "The four great powers are committed to Zionism, and Zionism, be it right or wrong, good or bad, is rooted in age-long traditions, in present needs, in future hopes, of far profounder import than the desires and prejudices of the 700,000 Arabs who now inhabit that ancient land." So this is a very clear case of relative humanization of the indigenous population of the land. But what concerns me in this presentation is decolonization, ethical decolonization, because in every discussion about settler colonialism, we should not be satisfied by just analyzing the roots of settler colonialism, the history of settler colonialism. We should really aspire to discuss and to act to end this case of settler colonialism, to decolonize the space ethically as possible. It's critical to talk about decolonization, especially as Zionist settler colonialism in Palestine is reaching an unprecedented level of criminality, of brutality, and what Ilan Pappé calls incremental genocide in Gaza. Gaza will in a few years be uninhabitable. The water supply is 95% polluted. We're seeing new diseases due to this pollution, induced pollution, that Israel is preventing the Palestinians from addressing by its hermetic siege of the Gaza Strip, where about 2 million Palestinians live. The overpumping of the common aquifer between Israel and Gaza is also causing a lot of problems for Gazans in that respect. The continuous wars of aggression and massacres committed by Israel and besieging this space in order not to allow Palestinians to even flee to safety to any other place. All these conditions are bringing about incremental acts of genocide against the Palestinians, making addressing Zionist settler colonialism more crucial than ever at this point. But one might argue, to be practical, to be pragmatic, one needs to address those injustices that almost the entire universe agrees on, that is, the occupation of the 1967 territory, Gaza and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. Why address other rights when we can't even achieve that basic right of ending Israel's occupation in the 1967 occupied territory? Well, it's because Palestinians are not just those in the occupied territories. We are divided roughly into three main constituencies. Palestinians in the 1967 occupied territory make up 38% of the Palestinian people. Palestinians who are citizens of the present-day Israel are 12%, and Palestinians in exile are 50%. Even among Palestinians in historic Palestine, there's an enormous minority of refugees or internally displaced persons. Those and Palestinians in exile constitute about 68% of the Palestinian people, making the right of Palestinian refugees to return the most profound, the most important aspect of the question of Palestine. So as a human rights movement, the BDS focuses on all three rights, not just ending the 1967 occupation, because we are consistent with ourselves and because we address all human rights of all Palestinians, excuse me, not just those who are convenient to be considered Palestinian, as in the Oslo Accords, which reduced the Palestinian people largely to those in the 1967 occupied territories, ignoring the majority of the Palestinian people who are not in the occupied territories. BDS was launched by the absolute majority of Palestinian society in 2005. By that we mean political parties, trade unions, women's unions, academics, students, youth, refugee networks, and so on and so forth, representing Palestinians in historic Palestine as well as in exile. BDS, inspired by a very long tradition of Palestinian popular resistance, non-violent resistance against Zionist settler colonialism, and also inspired by the South African anti-apartheid movement and by the US civil rights movement, called for isolating Israel's regime of occupation, settler colonialism, and apartheid academically, culturally, militarily, and economically to achieve Palestinian rights under international law, ending the occupation, ending apartheid, and the right of Palestinian refugees to return. To achieve that, we've started many campaigns with partners across the world. Palestine Solidarity movements across the world, including SPSC, have played an extremely important role in not just raising awareness about Palestinian rights, which is very important, obviously, but doing something about decolonization, doing something about ending the complicity of states, of corporations, of institutions, of trade union pension funds in maintaining Israel's regime of occupation and apartheid. And that's the key issue. Reflection and conceptualizing the problem is not sufficient. Acting without reflection is not sufficient. So we need reflection and action, or what the Brazilian educator Paulo Freire calls praxis. We need that revolutionary praxis to decolonize, to ethically decolonize the space and allow people to live in freedom, justice, and equality. And BDS plays a very important role in that. Today, it's an important part of Palestinian popular resistance, and it is the most important aspect of international solidarity with the Palestinian struggle for self-determination and rights. Since 2005, when we launched the BDS call, until now, so 11 years after, we have achieved quite a lot more than we had anticipated to be possible in 2005. In the last couple of years, Israel has started referring to the BDS movement as a strategic threat to its entire regime of oppression. And this is quite ironic for a state as powerful as Israel, a nuclear power that is subsidized by your tax money in the UK, by US tax money, German tax money, French, Western tax money in general, to the tune of billions and billions of dollars every year, that is armed to its teeth, and that has open access to Western markets, even a favored access to Western markets. Why would such a state that's still very powerful be worried about a non-violent human rights movement that is based on international law, like the BDS movement? Well, Israel is indeed very powerful, but it is not designed, its system of power is not designed to face challenges like those presented by the BDS movement. So, for example, when the Scottish Trade Union Federation adopted BDS, what could Israel do? Bomb the Scottish Federation of Trade Unions? BDS tests the limits of Israel's power, if you will. It empowers people who support Palestinian rights to do something about it that is effective, that helps to isolate Israel's regime of oppression, just as apartheid South Africa was isolated, which played a very important role in ending apartheid, at least political apartheid, in South Africa. But a crucial question that might cross an average person's mind in Edinburgh, London, Johannesburg, Delhi, or San Francisco: why should I care? I have enough problems at home, and I'm sure all of you in this room can think of quite a few domestic issues that you would like to deal with and that form a priority for you, including your far-right government that is ending whatever is left from the welfare state across the UK. Trade unions, students, low-income families, everyone is being affected. So why should one care about standing in solidarity with Palestinians and joining the BDS movement to do so. At a very fundamental level, there is a responsibility, especially of citizens of the UK, clearly because of British colonialism leading to the establishment of the settler colony in Palestine. So there is a direct responsibility that's very fundamental, and it engenders a specific obligation to fight this injustice. At the second level, we recall what Martin Luther King Jr. once said, that boycott at a very basic level is disassociating from a system of evil. And that is hardly heroic, that is hardly altruistic. That's a profound moral obligation. To stop cooperating with an evil system, to withdraw this cooperation with an evil system, is a moral obligation. So that's also very important. Not to mention the sense of international solidarity. The oppressed of the world stand together against the oppressors, and that is also an obligation. But if you think about it in practical terms, when governments are involved in maintaining human rights violations and systems of apartheid and settler colonialism, when corporations are involved in profiting from crimes, there's a responsibility for citizens to act to stop that. Any person in Edinburgh, Glasgow, or anywhere else in Scotland has no power over where your tax money goes or is spent by your far-right government. That is true. So you cannot decide whether the British government will support Israel or not. But you can offset that support by joining the BDS movement, by joining a BDS campaign led by SPSC and other groups across the UK. That is a way to offset the fact that your tax money is helping to maintain Israel's settler colonialism, apartheid, and extreme conditions in the siege of Gaza. Now, BDS addresses, as I said, academic, cultural, economic, and other forms of isolation of Israel's regime and of entities, corporations, institutions that are complicit in this regime. In the last couple of years, we've transcended the academic and cultural impact to reach the beginning of an economic impact. A UN report showed that foreign direct investment in Israel's economy in 2014 dropped by 46% in comparison to 2013. Israel's exports have dropped this year sharply, actually, over the last couple of years especially, and BDS has played part of that. Moody's, the credit ratings agency, has said that if BDS gains traction, it may have a substantial impact on Israel's economy. So this is all very important to realize, that we're not just expending some effort in a futile way, in a futile campaign that has no chance of success. We are indeed succeeding in increasing Israel's isolation, in forcing large corporations like Veolia, CRH, Orange Telecommunications, and eventually we will force G4S to abandon their illegal projects in Israel, where Palestinian rights are violated. So we are succeeding at that level. Major pension funds are pulling investments out of Israeli banks, of international corporations that are involved in the occupation and other violations of human rights. Major banks are also withdrawing their investments. We're seeing a trend, and Israel cannot do much to stop this. Because of that, Israel has launched a full-fledged war against the BDS movement, trying to criminalize it or at least demonize it, and calls on its friends in the French government, the British government, Canadian, American government, and other governments that are friendly to suppress BDS from above after failing to do anything about BDS from below. BDS has kept growing and growing at the grassroots level. Among trade unions, even political parties, women's unions, academics, artists, LGBTQ groups, students, and so on and so forth. But at the government level, that's where Israel maintains a lot of influence. And it's using this influence to suppress BDS from above, passing legislation across the US, in France, in the UK, and an attempt at least to pass legislation to make it very difficult to support BDS. But that's also a suppression of free speech. That's also a suppression of free association. And indeed, the governments of Sweden, Ireland, and Netherlands stood up to this and said there is a right to pursue Palestinian rights through calling for a boycott of Israel. This is a right under their constitutions and under the European Convention on Human Rights. Major human rights organizations across the world have upheld our right to call for BDS against Israel, to achieve our inherent and UN stipulated rights under international law. The International Federation of Human Rights, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and lately Socialist International has also upheld the right to call for BDS against Israel to end the occupation and achieve Palestinian rights. So there's a growing movement across the world that is upholding our right to do BDS. But the most important response to Israel's war, legal war, espionage war, and propaganda war against BDS is to increase BDS activism, to intensify the campaigns against HP and G4S and calling for a military embargo and so on and so forth, and academic boycott, economic boycotts of all sorts. Those are very, very important. That is the most eloquent response to Israel's war on the BDS movement. They're despairing in their fight against BDS. BDS keeps growing thanks to the selfless, extremely creative efforts of thousands and thousands of activists across the world who want to see justice prevail in Palestine, who have no qualms that we can prevail, who are not colonized in their minds and think that Israel is a divine act that cannot be challenged, that every injustice can be challenged, every settler colonialism can be defeated when people across the world unite and end their complicity in maintaining this system. We salute you, and we rely on Scottish creativity and bravery to help further even to isolate Israel's regime of oppression economically, academically, and culturally. Together we can prevail. Together we certainly shall prevail. Thank you.